What it do, y'all? Gather round for a Redneck edition of Alpha Male Podcast. I normally put in a bio. That bio won't do much to establish my redneck bona fides. So I'm going to tell you two things about myself. Maybe one is a little bit too personal. To establish some redneck bona fides, my grandfather, also my uncle, that is my step-grandfather. Think about that. Chew on that for a minute. I'll come back and tell you how that's the case. But yeah, my step-grandfather, also my uncle. Also, my best friend and I in high school were walking home, or walking somewhere. We walked a lot because we were poor. We might have been old enough to have cars, but we didn't have the money to have cars, or maybe we were too young. But we saw a dead fox in the road. And for two poor Southern boys, it's kind of like leaving a $20 bill laying in the road, right? You don't do that. It's a $20 bill that doesn't belong to anybody. It was a fox that got hit by a car, but we checked it out and the pelt was good. So we take this fox home and skin it. Now, keep in mind, these are back in my heathen days. I did not grow up a Christian. Anyway, we skinned this fox out. We weren't going to eat the fox. Who knows how long it had been in the road. And but we kept the pelt because, again, that's good money. It's a good pelt. We have the skinned fox carcass. And us being bored Southern boys, what do you do except play a game of catch and or dodgeball with this dead fox carcass? Yeah. And as you might imagine, after a while of doing this, we are pretty much covered in blood. And we're, who knows, wrestling around, joking around, hitting each other with this dead fox. Just covered in blood and just probably smelling horrible and having a great time. Also, one of my very first girlfriends in high school is now that same best friend. That's his wife. And I was best man at their wedding. Talk about a small southern town. Now, how is my grandfather also my uncle? Well, two brothers. One with the older brother married my grandmother, and the younger brother married my mother. Uncle, grandfather. No, I am not inbred. But it should demonstrate some redneck bona fides. Grew up hunting and fishing and shooting and doing all manner of redneck things like rednecks be doing in the South. But I think this is going to be a fun episode because I think that there are some redneck skills that can help out the blue-collar and white-collar common man. Welcome to Alpha Male Podcast, where we talk about what it means to be a man the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, made in the image of God, strong, dominant, in control. Let's talk about some backwoods skills. Also kind of funny, my first email way back in the day, way back when there was like Yahoo and you got the little discs for internet, because internet cost money. You paid for it like by the minute, back when you had it dial-up internet. The first email address, maybe not my first one, the first one I remember was backwoodsthug at Yahoo, at whatever. It's long since fallen into obscurity, but backwoodsthug was, I think, my first one that I can remember email address way back in the day. That backwoods skills just kind of made me think of that. Now, hunting's kind of a given. But aside from hunting, butchering, not all country boys have this skill. This is a deeper level of country boy. A lot of country boys will go out and shoot a deer, and then they'll go take it to the butcher to have it ground into sausage and mixed with all kinds of stuff. But a real backwoodsman will butcher his own deer. Actually, I spent a big chunk of the Thanksgiving break with my wife, who also got some time off, which was a blessing, and she likes quality time. And one of the things that we like to do together is butcher animals. She likes doing that with me. She has her master's degree in health, exercise, and sports science. And she enjoys like seeing how the muscles work together and seeing how the different joints and the different ligaments and everything work together. She actually enjoys butchering with me. And in fact, I was blessed to be, I was a professional big game hunter and guide at the time. When I took her on her first successful big game hunt, I got to guide for my wife, which was great. And not only did we, it was a Texas doll sheep. That was her first big game animal. Not only did we get to enjoy that hunt together, but we also got to butcher that together. And she talked me into eating the Rocky Mountain oysters, of which I usually don't partake, but she was going to eat them and I didn't. If she was going to eat them, then I kind of felt like I should eat them too. But that, the pancreas, the heart, the liver, all good stuff. But my wife and I enjoy butchering. Butchering is definitely a backwoods skill that you should have, even if you don't want to hunt. Especially with times in inflation the way that they are, just being able to take apart an animal, maybe buying it whole, maybe talking to a butcher and getting a good deal, or going in with a buddy on a half a cow or a half a sheep, or one of my favorite meats, goat. I like goat meat. And I grew up poor in the South, so we had goat. I like goat. I really do. I want my meat to taste like meat. I don't want everything to taste like chicken. If I want chicken, I'll eat chicken. If I want beef, I'll get beef, right? I don't want my wild game to taste like beef. I want it to taste like wild, manly, rugged game meat. And a meat that definitely tastes distinct is goat. And I like me a good piece of goat meat. But learning how to butcher is definitely a manly skill. And I've been very blessed to help out a patron who's been reaching out to me trying to figure out how to hunt and things like that. And he recently took a buck. And for a while he was kind of stressed out about butchering it and things like that. And I basically told him, man, there's no wrong way to do it. Just if you're taking meat off the bone, you're doing okay. There are many different ways to butcher game. I've learned many over my years of hunting and professional hunting and guiding and hunting in all different kinds of cultures, because many different cultures have many different ways to butcher. But you're taking meat off the bone, you're probably okay, right? There's really no wrong way to do it. Get the guts out. Take the meat off the bone. There's probably more efficient ways than you're going to do it the first time, but don't be afraid to get your hands a little bit dirty, a little bit bloody. Butchering is definitely a good skill to have. Even if you just want to start soft and buy, some kind of quail or duck or chicken at the local farm supply store and raise it up for a couple months and butcher it yourself. Or if it's legal where you are, a good redneck skill is learning how to and when to eat roadkill. I'm not going to pretend like we didn't eat roadkill growing up. But however you get to use that skill of butchering, maybe you just buy a big slab of meat. Again, maybe you just go in with a buddy and buy a big chunk of a cow and learn to butcher and make your own steaks. Or maybe you want to turn that into other skills like learning how to make jerky, or my favorite, biltong. All good skills. I should move on because we're already at 8 minutes. So let's move on. Butchering. Canning. This is something else my wife and I like to do. Canning. It's not just for Susie Homemaker. It's not just for, I almost said Dianne Feinstein, but that's not Martha Stewart. It's not just for Martha Stewart, right? Canning. And you can can more than just jam. Now, my wife and I also like to forage, going out and foraging, and we've just been foraging quite a bit of apples. We got apples for Thanksgiving in addition to wild game meat. God was very good to us. A lot of wild apples around here in northern Idaho. But you can can more than just fruit. That's a common one. We also like to make jam because I don't eat that stuff. My wife really likes to, so we can go out and pick tons of blackberries or, whatever is in your area and make jam. And canning is definitely part of that. That's kind of one of the reasons that jam became a thing, because it lasts longer. But you can also can meat. You can can stews, you can pressure can, you can water bath can, and you do you. I'm not telling you what's safe. You should probably follow all blah, 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 blah procedures for health and safety and blah, 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 blah. I'm telling you that I trust the bad food detector that God gave me, which is my nose. If meat is rotten in a can and I open it, I will know that it is rotten. Period. End of sentence. That's me. You do you. But canning, also a very good skill and may become more crucial in the future. But maybe you just want to use the resources that are around you. Yeah, sure. Honestly, it probably doesn't make a lot of financial sense right now. You can probably go find some strawberry jam on sale if you eat jam. That's cheaper than you can make jam. if you consider your labor and stuff. But it's also a fun activity to get you outdoors and go collect wild strawberries or wild blueberries or blackberries. Or there's probably, if you're listening in America, probably blackberries grow many of the places where you are, or blueberries or something. And you often need a license. So if you have henceforth been a city boy, you often need a license and all kinds of regulations and stuff to go out and kill stuff and eat it. But you generally don't need anything to go out on public land and hunt and gather. Or actually, forget that. You do need it for hunting, but for gathering, for being a forager, you generally don't need anything. Don't start with mushrooms. That can be rather dangerous. But berries are often easy to identify. So learning how to use those and canning. And canning things like stews and vegetables, asparagus, whatever it is you're into. Also on the canning, pickling. You know what's redneck and so good? Pickled eggs. Oh, so good. And pickled watermelon rind. Is there anything more redneck than pickled watermelon rind? You want to get into canning and you don't really want to spend any money or the process of getting into canning, just save your old pickle juice. Again, I'm not telling you it's safe. I'm just telling you many people, myself included for a long time, have just thrown hard-boiled eggs into old pickle juice. And if you are patient enough, that's the hardest part because they're so good. The hardest part is waiting long enough for the pickle juice to soak through them. But pickled eggs are awesome. Also, pickled watermelon rind, because most people just throw the watermelon rind away. But pickled watermelon rind can be quite the redneck delicacy. Another one. Making wine, making beer, and or making shine. Now, heat distilling is illegal. So, heat distilling for human consumption is illegal. I'll leave it at that. There are other ways to distill. But heat distilling is illegal. But it is totally legal for you to make wine and beer. I actually enjoy making wine and beer and meads and lambic and things like that. And I don't even drink. I'll have a sip for communion. I'm not saying I'll never drink. I think the last time I had a beer was the last big school I completed in the Army. That was years ago. But one of my buddies said, when we get done with this, have a beer with me. And I said, okay, I'll have a beer with you. That's been years and years. And it was probably years and years before that. Jesus drank. I have no problem with drinking. I have no problem with the consumption of alcohol. But I'm generally armed. So I generally don't partake because I see it as my kind of... We all have our different callings, right? Jesus drank. John the Baptist did not. Obviously, John the Baptist is not holier than thou because he didn't drink. He was called to that. Nazarites are called not to drink. Some people are called to drink and some are not. That seems pretty clear. I just generally don't drink. I got nothing against drinking. I actually like to make beer and wine and give it away. It's a great gift. You're a little strapped for cash this year and you want to make sure it's legal. But I'm pretty sure it's legal as long as you don't sell it, to just give it away. I like to make beer and wine and give it away. Going back to that, collecting blackberries, collecting dandelions, collecting strawberries. Probably not grapes because, to be honest, you can probably just buy regular wine that's going to be pretty affordable with grapes. But you can make wine with all kinds of stuff, and it's not hard, guys. It's not hard to make wine. Fruit, water, yeast, and time. That's it. That's all it is. Right? Our ancestors have been making it for thousands of years. It doesn't have to be super complicated. Again, I'm not telling you what you should do to be safe, but I'm telling you what I use. If I make a batch of wine or beer, and it doesn't smell like alcohol, it doesn't smell like wine or beer, and it smells rotten, then it's rotten, and I throw it away. End of story. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. But making wine and beer, certainly a redneck skill. And maybe you want to do it to save money. Maybe you want to do it just to use the resources that are on your land. Muscadine wine, dandelion wine. Maybe you want to just make a unique gift, right? Anybody could go to relatives and here's a bottle of wine that I bought at grocery outlet, right, wherever you shop. But to say, hey, I made this 6 months ago and I saved it for this occasion for us to drink together around a campfire. Whatever the case is, right? Making beer and wine, even if you don't drink. Unless you are, certainly opposed to drinking at all, which I would say refer to the Bible on that. Jesus' first miracle was making water into wine. But I'm not telling you, if you have a conviction and you can't be around alcohol, or that's your temptation and you're called not to drink, I certainly know there are people like that, then this is not for you. But for most other people, you can make alcohol whether you even want to drink it or not. Here's a real practical one, especially as times get a little bit tighter, tightening that belt in the budget. Being a mechanic is not a redneck skill. Being a mechanic with less than optimal stuff, I think, is totally a redneck skill. I remember we had this, for a while we were so redneck, we had one of the old push mowers without a motor that you just pushed, and it had the little spinny wheels. But at some point, we stepped up in the world and got a gasoline-powered, high-powered lawnmower. Still a push mower, but a step in the right direction. Well, it wouldn't turn off. So the redneck fix for that was my grandfather showed me that if you hit the back of it with a rake and cause a short where the spark plug is, you can get that to turn off pretty reliably. So for a while, that's how we turned off the lawnmower. Stuff like that is what I'm talking about. Like, maybe you don't have the right bolt, but with a different bolt and 2 or 3 washers, you can make it work. Make a longer bolt and do a shorter bolt. Stuff like that, like a redneck fix. Mechanics with less. I think that redneck ingenuity is kind of its own unique flavor and can be useful. Obviously, there's a time and a place for the right tool for the right job. But there's also a time and a place where you just have to get this thing to work, to get you to safety, to get you off the road, to get you to the nearest town, to whatever it is, where knowing how to improvise in a mechanical situation can really, really help you out. And I think that's an important redneck skill that everybody should at least be acquainted with. Here's one. What's more redneck than varmint extermination? Right? You got a mouse, you got a rat. You don't call the Orkin man. You roll up your sleeves and get it done. Whether that's knowing how to set a mouse trap or knowing how to make an improvised trap. Whether it's, setting snares for a coyote, down to getting rid of some prairie dogs or a gopher, or the common field mouse. Varmint extermination. And looking historically, disease kills many, many people throughout history. We kind of have a brief respite from that with modern culture and sanitation and hospitals and antibiotics. But if that goes away, those nasty, disgusting rodent vermin carry all kinds of diseases, from the Black Plague, the bubonic plague, to intestinal parasites and worms, to hantavirus, and who knows how many more. A collection sack for parasites. Knowing how to get rid of those animals, if some of that stuff goes away, is, I think, could be very beneficial to everybody. Here's one, and this, I think, has become more popular, but definitely, I think, has deep roots in the redneck culture. That is yard sales, flea markets, swap meets, any of those things. Flea markets, yard sales, even some people do it as a hobby. My wife's family, that's like one of the things they do. Like, they'll do with their parents is like, my wife's brother will get up early on the weekend, which I could think of so many other things I'd rather do than wake up early and go to yard sales. But that's the thing. That's like what they like to do, like to get up early and look for stuff at a bargain. Well, we all know inflation is high. I don't know what they're saying it is, but I think we can all look around and see the prices of things going up. That might be a skill that you might want to look into. To tell a funny story, my wife and I first got together. My wife is, high class, classy lady, master's degree, high-end apartment, and I was doing something. I was covered in oil, and I went and sat on the couch, and she was so mad. And I could not understand why she was so mad. I covered her brand new couch in oil, and I had no idea, because I usually just buy used couches. That's just how I am. Like a used couch, a used futon. When we met, I had a futon living in the ghetto in a very small apartment. Right? When I found out how much she spent for her couch, I'm not gonna say it because I'm still shocked. But she spent so much money on this couch. Like, you could buy a car that runs for the price of this couch. No wonder she was mad at me for sitting on there covered in oil. It just never occurred to me because I don't buy furniture like that. But so let's say you need a new piece of furniture or something like that. Flea market, swap meet, yard sales. And going with that, kind of wrapped up in that, The skill of haggling, the skill of negotiating. I think so many times today we get into the habit of this is the price, this is what it is. And that's true if you're at like a Walmart or something like that. But what about swap meets, flea markets? Can you suggest a lower price? You don't have to make them take it. But the art of haggling and negotiating. What if I buy these 2 things? What if I buy the rest of what you have of this? Because a lot of times they just want to sell what they have and get out. If I buy all the books you have here, if I just give you one price, instead of haggling $3 for this book, $2 for this book, what if I just offer you, bam, $20 for all these books? I'm just throwing out an example, right? The art of haggling, the art of negotiation with goods and services and bartering. I think that is very much a redneck skill that hopefully will come back in the future to the common person. I think a lot of people now just shop at a big box store, just order on Amazon. Their idea of negotiation is waiting for, Prime Day or whatever, Black Friday deal. But actually going out and negotiating on your own, I think that is a very good to have skill. Tying into that, how about the redneck skill of junkyards? Right, going to a junkyard. And or if you're a true, if you are a redneck, if you are a big redneck, your entire yard might be its own junkyard. Like you got 3 or 4 lawnmowers that don't work anymore, maybe an old tractor, maybe 3 or 4 old cars, your first car, your kid's first car, all broken down in the yard. That's pretty redneck. And a lot of people will keep those around because they think that they might use parts from them, or one day they'll fix them up. But what is not unheard of for rednecks is to have a go-to running vehicle and then to have a broken, just junker vehicle. Maybe they have a Ford Ranger and they have a very similar year Ford Ranger that's broken down that they get parts off of. You need an alternator? Don't go and buy one new from Napa. Rip out the alternator from the old broken down Ford Ranger in your yard. It doesn't work too well for people in the city that live in an apartment, but you get the idea. But even most people that live in a city, that live in a people hive, that live in an apartment, can go find a pickup part and go pull out an alternator. So you can still glean from the redneck junkyard skill, even if you don't yourself have a junkyard. Especially, again, if times are getting tight. Especially now with YouTube, you can probably look up and see, how can I tell if an alternator is good or bad? It's not that hard. Most alternators, there's probably some that through engineering are really hard to remove, but most alternators are not hard to take off. And I'm just picking alternator, I don't know why, maybe because it starts with A, and it's one of the first things I thought of. But it's not that hard to go get an alternator and swap out an alternator. And if you can do that on your own for $40 as opposed to $300 or whatever it's going to cost with parts and labor, right? That might be worth your time and effort to tap into that inner redneck skill. Go to a junkyard. Here is one. I know this is the Alpha Male podcast, and I think men can do this, but this is for your redneck women. The ability to make a good biscuit. And I don't mean grands, you pop open the little thing and throw them in the oven. I mean the ability to make a biscuit from basic ingredients. Flour, salt, and water. You can add some other stuff to that if you want. Butter is really helpful. Lard, ghee, beef tallow, Crisco, whatever. However you like to make biscuits, right? There's many ways to make a biscuit, but the ability to make a basic biscuit. Why is this? So that you can make, generally, if you got this and you got some meat, you can usually scrounge around for enough stuff in your house to make a decent meal, if you need to. Forget about Uber Eats. Forget about fancy 5-star restaurant. I'm not sure of any man that would complain if a woman made him a good plate of biscuits and a well-cooked piece of meat. All right, the next one. How about redneck fishing methods? Now, I'm a big-time hunter, lifelong hunter, but I'm not going to put hunting in here because many people just aren't going to hunt. I've come to that realization. I think most men should know how to hunt, but many men are not. But I think a lot more men will learn how to fish. If it's legal, there is a lot more ways to fish than getting in your $30,000 bass boat with your $200 rod and reel filled with who knows how much money's worth of gas to go catch bass that you're going to throw back in the water because catch and release. There is nothing wrong with that, but I would consider that sport fishing. You're fishing for sport. If you are fishing for meat, if you are fishing for fish to eat, there are a lot more practical ways, again, if they're legal in your area. There's many ways. I didn't mention that my father was a commercial fisherman and his father before him, and I did that when I was growing up, commercial fishing. But there are many ways. The two that I'm going to talk about, because I think they're the most easily attainable, are jug fishing and trot lines. I remember me and my buddy making a trot line in the bridge in our small town growing up. A trot line, you can do a trot line from the top or a trot line from the bottom, depending on what you're going for. But the idea is, instead of holding a rod and standing there with a hook and a piece of bait on it, you have a long line. In fact, when you do it in the ocean, it's often called long lining. But you have a long main line, whether it's tarred bank line or 550 cord or whatever. I don't care. Every so often, you have or you make a loop in the main line or attach a sling swivel on which to attach a shorter line, usually of much less strength than the main line, because you want that to break if something happens, not your main line. If it gets snagged or something, you want the branch lines to snap and not your main line. But every so often, every so many feet, you attach a hook with some bait. Now, the size of hook, the amount of bait, that will depend on the fish that you're fishing for. But a little pro tip, you can catch a big fish on a small hook, but it's a lot harder to catch a small fish on a big hook. So I generally err on the side of smaller hooks. But if it's legal, you can make a trot line, and you could make a dozen hooks on one line. Now, be ethical about this. If you make a trot line, don't make it and check it a week later. You probably want to check it every day. You can make a trot line and check it on the way to or from work and catch several fish every day. If you're actually going to eat fish as part of your diet, that's a lot more productive than standing there with a rod and reel. And I love fishing with a rod and reel. But if you're talking about a pure resource standpoint, trot lines, also on that jug fishing. Now, trot lines will work in pretty much any water. They'll work in the ocean. They'll work in bays, estuaries, rivers, lakes. Jug fishing, the next one I'm going to talk about, pretty much is mostly for ponds, maybe lakes, but very placid water. You take a jug. You take like a gallon jug. I like something with a handle, something like one of the old Arizona tea containers or something like that. And you basically attach a pretty sturdy piece of line, again, tarred bank line, 550 cord, and you have that go down. Maybe you want some weight on it, a small amount of weight, and you have a more traditional piece of fishing line like monofilament and a hook for the appropriate type of fish that you are fishing for, with some bait, with a minnow or a chicken liver or whatever it is that you're trying to fish for. And you have probably several jugs in a small pond. And if the pond is so big that you cannot wade out and get these jugs, or if weather doesn't permit or whatever, you may need a small craft, a canoe, a john boat or whatever, or a really long piece of bamboo or something with a gaff on it to pull these jugs in, depending on the size of water. But you can just grab the jug and pull it in and see if there's a fish on it. If you have several of these jugs and you get a couple of fish a day, that can really add up to quite a good haul of good fish, right? All the buzzwords. Gluten-free fish, organic fish, sustainably harvested fish, high protein, low fat, keto, all the buzzwords, right? Good, healthy food. And these are fishing methods that many rednecks are acquainted with. Not that we don't enjoy picking up a rod and reel and fishing just for fun, and many times just throwing a fish back. I got no problem with that either. But if you're talking about, again, a resource to literally put meat on the table, those more backwoods fishing methods come in pretty handy. Two big ones I'm going to close with. Very much a redneck thing. Function over appearance, right? You might have a redneck with a truck that's 4 different colors. This side panel came from a different year model, different color. It may have an alternator from a different year truck on it, but it still runs, it still works. I would rather have that old beat up truck than the truck that is much newer and nicer looking, but is not dependable, doesn't start, right? You get the idea. function over appearance. For instance, my wife and I have a fairly old F-150. It's a 2010, so it's 13 years old. As soon as we got it, but shortly after we got it, we truck bed lined it. Monster Liner is the brand that I like because it comes in many different colors. But I know me. I know that I'll take it off-roading. I'll drag trees and stuff down the side of it, trying to get through trails that are way too small for a pickup truck and things like that. Probably not going to wash it. I'm probably going to clean guns on it. You get the idea. So why not just truck bed liner it? It needed new paint anyway when we bought it. And why pay somebody to paint it when I can do it myself? Roll on truck bed liner. That's what I'm talking about how it functions over how it looks. It doesn't look horrible. It doesn't look like a normal shiny truck either. But I think that is something we should all be circumspect. And I think that's something that's gone the wrong way in our culture. I think too many times we care about how we look to others versus how we can actually perform. How many women out there want to look healthy as opposed to actually be healthy? I remember a conversation. I was leading a team of men, a tactical team in a metropolitan area to stop active shooters. And I was I'm still pretty big into fitness, but it was pretty obvious then I was into fitness. And one of the guys that was working, let's say, adjacent to us, bodybuilder type guy, is talking about bodybuilding. And he was an aspiring bodybuilder. And he asked me what my goals were. Now, most of the time, I think when he asked people that, he was expecting them to say, I want huge lats or I want giant muscles. And I told him, I want to be as strong and healthy, pound for something like this. I don't remember the exact words, but I said something like, I want to be as strong, pound for pound, as I can be. And he just kind of was dumbfounded. And one of the other guys that was also into bodybuilding and fitness looked at him and was like, you don't even know what to say to that, do you? Because so many people in our culture, they want to look fit. They want to have giant muscles. They care about the look. That is a byproduct to me. I certainly look healthy. I certainly, by God's grace, have a six-pack and have for who knows how many years. I certainly have big biceps. I'm blessed for my health. But that is a byproduct. My goal is to be healthy. God gave me this body, and I try and use it and take care of it and be the best survivor, the best healthy version of me that God has made me to be, knowing that I am more than my body. I am an eternal being in a physical body. But looking healthy and looking fit is a byproduct of actually being fit, and that's what I care about more. Don't put the cart before the horse. Don't care more about looking like something than actually being that thing. If you care about just looking good, I would submit that's vanity. If you care about actually being healthy and taking care of the body that God's given you, I would say that's a noble thing. So, function over appearance. It's a big thing. The next one, I mentioned I did not grow up a Christian, and I didn't. I grew up a heathen. Just went down the wrong road for a long time in my life. But one thing that I do remember that we did, and it was probably more because it was Southern culture than actually deep Christian theology, but we said grace. I remember my grandmother saying grace, saying a prayer at dinner. And that's one of the few traditions I'm proud to pass on in my home, that God's allowed me to pass on. Now, it means, I think, much more to me now because I understand that Almighty God made me and created me. And when I didn't deserve it, He chose to save me. And when I was drenched in my sin, when I turned my back on God, He didn't give up on me, and He sent His Son. He became sin who knew no sin, that I might become the righteousness of God in Him. And I realize that every breath that I take is a gift from God, and everything that I eat is a blessing from God. It means more to me now, but I'm happy for that Southern backwoods tradition of saying grace. It's a good one. I just want to throw this out there. If you have a redneck skill, a backwoods skill that I did not mention, you can contact me. One, you can write a review for the podcast and say, hey, good episode. Here's a redneck skill you forgot. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can rate the show and leave a review in some kind of way. They might call it rating or hitting some stars or whatever, and a lot of times it'll let you leave a review. Or on Spotify, there's a thing where I can ask you questions, where I flipped it around and said, you guys ask me questions. But you could get on there on Spotify after you listen to this episode and say, hey, here's a skill that I think you should have had on there. Not just to help me. Right? I don't do this show to help me. I do it to help the community. I do it to help other men. So if you post something on there, consider it being a blessing to other men. So you might think, great, you forgot about this. So if you listen on Spotify, you can do it that way. If you listen on Apple, you can do it in a review, and there's many other platforms that you may be able to do that on. Anyway, with that, the tactical tip of the day. It's cold out there in many places. Looking up the weather, it says 31 degrees where I am right now in northern Idaho. I don't know when you're going to listen to this or where you at. You could be in the tropics for all I know. But if it gets cold where you are, again, I grew up poor in the South. One of the things I think is known to rule people in the South that is not, I haven't seen it too many places other than that, is the kerosene heater. I remember huddling around a kerosene heater when a large portion of our house was not heated because we didn't have the money to heat it. Even if kerosene heat is not your primary, a kerosene heater can be a great resource if something should happen. And I'm not talking just about in the backwoods of nowhere. I'm talking about in cities. There have been major power outages in New York and Texas when things get cold. Having a backup heat source, such as a kerosene heater, right? The good thing about kerosene is it lasts a really, really long time. You could have it and not use it for years, and then if you need it, it's there. So a kerosene heater, that's a good thing, I think, to know how to use, even if you mostly don't heat your house with a kerosene heater. In a pinch, you can even use a kerosene heater and have it burn off other things, but that's probably outside the scope of this. Tactical verse of the day. The verse for today. And there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, and all to which you have put your hand, you and your households, in which the Lord your God has blessed you. You shall not at all do as we are doing here today, every man doing whatever is right in his own eyes. All right, a couple of big points there for your hip pocket improvised sermon for the day. Whatever you have, especially in this season, be thankful to God. He is the giver. You didn't get it by your own strength. It was by God, whether you realize it or not, whether you acknowledge God or not. God makes the rain fall on the just and the unjust alike. You could not draw a single breath without God. You would not have another morsel of food without God. You would not have another day unless God ordains it so. He is sovereign. Be thankful because everything you have is a gift from God. That is proper perspective. Also, the second main point, we are not to do like God mentions here. Don't do whatever is right in your own eyes, or whatever culture says is right, or whatever the whim of the day is. There is an ultimate truth for what is right and wrong. The author of that, right and wrong. The truth is the Word of God. There is an objective truth. And that's so important in today's wishy-washy garbage culture, that there is an actual truth. There is an actual right and wrong. And it's not whatever you feel like. It's not what each person thinks that it is. It's not whatever you decide. It's not everybody doing whatever is right in his own eyes. No, it's the Word of God. And we have a great gift, being able to have and read the Word of God. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.